Canadian airline passengers have long been frustrated with inconsistent rules and regulations surrounding passenger rights and compensation when it comes to flight delays and the like. Now, Canada recently passed a new airline passenger bill of rights with some regulations coming into effect July 15th, while others will not start until December 15th. Joining me now from Cyprus via Skype is Chrystel, Erotokritou, a legal advisor for AirHelp, an organization which helps travelers get compensation for delayed and canceled flights. Chrystel, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much.
Now, perhaps the most common complaint is delayed or canceled flights, leaving travelers stranded. Passengers have the right to compensation for this, but how many of us are actually aware of that compensation?
In the European Union, where we have strong air passenger rights regulations for the last 15 years, about 20% of passengers are aware of their rights, and only 66% do claim for compensation. We do not have proper numbers for Canada at the moment because the new regulations have just been enacted, but we suspect that the numbers will be very similar until we actually educate passengers on their new rights.
So under the new rules then, Chrystel, if a flight is delayed or canceled because of overbooking, what is the minimum compensation the airline will have to pay out?
Maybe first it is worth mentioning that the new laws will come into force in July and in December. In July, the passengers will be able to get compensation in the event that they are denied boarding. The amounts will vary from 900 Canadian dollars to 2,400 Canadian dollars. The amount depends on the total delay at their final destination following the rerouted flight on which the airline has put them. For a delay up to 9 hours, the compensation is $900. For a delay up to 6 hours, the compensation is $900. From 6 hours to 9 hours, the compensation is $1,800. And for a delay of more than 9 hours, the compensation is $2,400.
So, Chrystel, if the flight is disrupted for safety reasons, then the airline is not required to pay compensation. Is that true?
If the flight is delayed for a safety reason that is outside of the airline's control, such as a mechanical malfunction that has been identified outside of the scheduled maintenance, the airlines indeed will not have to pay flight compensation. However, the airline will still have to provide care and assistance to the passengers in the form of meals, drinks, accommodation if an overnight stay is needed, transportation to and from the place of accommodation to the airport, as well as access to means of communication such as telephone calls or free Wi-Fi.
Now, what are some of the other minimum standards? I'm told that this now includes making sure that all passengers have access to working toilets?
Yes, the passenger must also have access to working toilets. There must be proper ventilation in the aircraft. They must be given medical attention if needed. And also importantly, the airline must communicate to the passengers in a clear and accessible way the reasons for the flight disturbance, and must update the passenger on the flight status every 30 minutes.
I've heard some concerns regarding a possible loophole for airlines when it comes to a delay caused by a mechanical problem discovered while on the tarmac. Is that true?
Indeed, the new regulations do not oblige the airlines to compensate the passenger if the delay is caused by a mechanical malfunction that is discovered while the aircraft is on the tarmac about to take off. In the European Union, such events would not be considered extraordinary. They would be considered as falling totally within the control of the airline. So in the end, we have a situation where passengers in Europe are fully compensated for this kind of technical problems, while Canadian passengers are not compensated. So we don't really understand why the same situation leads to different protections from one side of the Atlantic to the other.
Should Canadians really be raising these concerns with their members of parliament?
Canadians should definitely be raising these concerns with the members of parliament. AirHelp is continuing its lobbying efforts in Canada, and we are now waiting to see how the Canadian Transport Agency will implement the rules on practical terms.
Now, what rights would a passenger have, Chrystel, if a plane had to turn back partway through a flight because of a mechanical problem or maybe some other issue?
The airline will have to reroute the passengers as fast as possible to their final destination. The airline will have to provide care and assistance as meals, drinks, hotel to the passengers, and must also provide information to the passengers as to the reasons of the flight delay and the status update.
Now, we all really dislike it when our luggage gets lost. I mean, we can all relate to that. It's happened to many of us here, which can cause all kinds of personal and business complications. What are passenger rights for lost luggage?
Under the new regulations, passengers are entitled to compensation up to $2,100 in the event that their bag is damaged or lost. And the airline must also refund the applicable baggage fees.
Now, one of the interesting changes that it will be held by mid-December, airlines will have to ensure that children under the age of 5 are seated next to their parent or guardian, and kids 5 to 11 are in the same row and no more than 1 seat away from their parent. Is that true?
That's exact. Under the new regulations, a child of less than 5 years old needs to be next to his parent or accompanying adult. A child up to 11 years old needs to be in the same row, and a child from 12 to 14 needs to be in close proximity. There must be only one row between him and his parents.
Now, there are differing passenger rights from country to country. You've chit-chatted a bit about what's happening with the EU, and we've talked about what's happened here in Canada. Which country has the best rules, and which country has the worst?
The country that has the best rules is actually the whole of the European Union, so the 28 member states. We have a very strong air passenger rights legislation that came into force in 2005 that protects all passengers that fly from the European Union to any place, as well as all passengers flying from third countries to the European Union when the flights are operated by EU carriers. When it comes to the country that has the worst air passenger rights, actually there are a lot of countries in the world that still do not have any kind of protection for passengers.
What are some of those countries? Do you know off the top of your head?
For example, the United States have very poor air passenger protection. Passengers are only protected in the event of a denied boarding, while the vast majority of flights are rather delayed than overbooked.
Now, you also rate the airlines with regards to passenger rights. What are some of the top 3 in the world? When I was a kid, I remember my parents used to love flying with Lufthansa. I don't know if that's still the case anymore when it comes to passenger rights. Which are some of the best, and even some of the best here in Canada?
Every year, AirHelp is putting together its AirHelp Airline Score, where we list the best airlines in terms of punctuality, in terms of claim compensation processing. The best airline this year is Qatar Airlines. And in Canada, Air Canada, WestJet, and Air Transat were on the average. So there is still room for improvement for the 3 big Canadian carriers.
Now, when somebody runs into problems, how do we talk about getting compensation? Who should we talk to?
You can use AirHelp services. It is very easy. You just have to go on our website, airhelp.com. You give us some information about your flights. You upload your documents such as e-ticket, boarding pass, and from then AirHelp will take care of all the process. We will be fighting with the airlines. We always try to settle things amicably, but if this is not possible, we will take legal action on the passengers' behalf, and the passengers will not have to do anything. Also, we operate on no win, no fee, so if we don't manage to successfully obtain flight compensation, this is not costing anything to the passenger.
Chrystel Erotokritou, a legal advisor for AirHelp. Thanks a lot for joining me today from Cyprus.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.